Okay, one, two, three. Welcome to Mom and Dad Talks, where our favorite people are Mom and Dad. Today, Todd Hunt, the normal host of this program, he and his wife have been called away to minister to a friend of theirs who had a tragic loss overnight. So our prayers and condolences are with them. In addition, Todd's mom and dad, I don't know where they are. And my mom, she's probably with them. So we grabbed the next best thing. We grabbed somebody's parents, and that would be Pastor and Sister Gator. And we have somebody step in for my mom. That would be my friend Javon Cornelius. Pastor Gator is a longtime retired pastor, and his wonderful wife, she is a retired educator as well. Javon Cornelius is a content and film producer along with a company owner and entrepreneur. And we want their opinions today about today's hot topic. Today's topic is about July the 4th. Now, I got to admit, it's a little misleading because we're talking about it in the context of Juneteenth. Hasn't been that long ago that we all discovered Juneteenth was about the last slaves who were really located in Galveston, Texas, who were notified that they were free. And at that moment, United States became a free nation because if all your citizens are free and they don't know it, then you're not really free. However, I grew up celebrating Independence Day on July the 4th. And July the 4th, I was always taught was the day that we became free. But in 1776, the Declaration of Independence wasn't written for African Americans because you still had slavery. So now what do you do with the information? So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to start with you, Sister Gator. Let's start with this. How were you taught to view July 4th coming up as a child?
I had a wonderful experience, and we were taught to gather together as a family. My mom and dad had 7 children, and two of the girls with their families lived out of state. One sister lived in Maryland, one sister lived in Detroit with their families. But every 4th of July, without fail, everyone would convene at the home house in Orange Mound in Memphis, Tennessee. Dad would build a fire pit or fireplace barbecue pit, and he would barbecue. My aunts and uncles would come from Detroit and from areas in Memphis. And for us, the 4th of July was just a gathering of family, eating, enjoying each other's company, watching the fireworks because our home was not too far from the fairground. So we could literally, as children, sit in the front yard and watch the fireworks. As far as the history of the 4th of July, I never got any of that as a child. So again, 4th of July was just a gathering of family. My dad would put the American flag out front, but nothing else was said about it.
Cool. Pastor Gator, how did you come up observing the July 4th holiday?
Some of it was similar to my wife. We would shoot fireworks. Sometimes my dad, who was from Alabama, country Alabama, he had a lot of guns. So sometimes he would shoot the guns. Sometimes he would let us shoot the guns. And we would just we didn't have all of the eating per se, but we had family there, but no flags. We never put up, as I can remember, a flag during 4th of July. It was, I don't know, as a child, I don't know why, but evidently my father, my mother, maybe they didn't see the significance for them. And so flags weren't that important.
Thank you. Javon, how did you come up observing July 4th as a kid?
Man, I will say this. Prior to high school, it was just a day to, be patriotic. And, family got together. We had a barbecue. I always knew before high school that it was just a moment that America became free from rule from someone else. But when I got to high school and my best friends got into stuff like being Muslims and stuff, and they were educating me, it was like, oh, okay, this holiday really has nothing to do with me because African Americans were still enslaved. So that's how I came up. I always, after high school, it was more of, okay, this is just a day I get together with my friends, but I'm not super patriotic, you know? And life, I don't have enough time to be Cornell West. I'm just trying to work a job. It's not a big deal to me. And so that's kind of how it was coming up. You just knew that it was a holiday to celebrate, but in terms of it really wasn't something that just I looked forward to uh, in terms.
So I think that we all, even spanning maybe three different eras, three different generations of childhood, all had similar upbringing. My father, he was a barbecuer. He loved to barbecue. So he looked for any
Yes,
excuse. July 4th was a barbecue holiday. Memorial Day, Labor Day, right? Those were barbecue holidays. My dad could really barbecue. He was also ex-military. He served in the army and he served in Korea during armistice. But he was not super patriotic. And when I say that, we didn't grow up in our home putting up the American flag on July 4th.
yeah,
But he didn't have a problem with it. It's just, he just didn't do it. And I never really asked him about it, but he made it very clear that patriotism is something that gets misconstrued a lot of times. Because he fought for this country. He literally fought for this country, literally was in another country, standing up for our freedoms globally.
yes.
And he never, ever flaunted his patriotism. One of the things I learned from him was very, very profound. Patriotism isn't standing up and holding a flag. Patriotism is still loving a country when it doesn't love you back.
Uh,
And as an African American in the military, he experienced that quite a bit.
yes.
So later on, nobody, a lot of these holidays, we never stop and sit down and examine why we do what we do. Columbus Day, I don't even have to go into that. If you know who Christopher, if you just sit down and read who Christopher, he was a criminal on the run, a pedophile. He never actually set foot on the continental United States. Yet a federal holiday that people get paid for. We take time off and honor this man who wasn't ever American. He was from Spain, right?
Yeah,
We do a lot of stuff that didn't make sense over the years, but when you
yeah,
know better, you do better. So before I ask you all this second question, I'm gonna set it up. I learned years ago, some 10 years ago, I wrote a paper um, um, and submitted it to FH Jenkins Preparatory School for us to not sing the Star Spangled Banner anymore, but to sing something else before games, like God Bless America. And we adopted it. We started doing that. It was because when I found out, when I said I actually just read, is that there's nothing secret. When I actually read the lyrics to the Star Spangled Banner, when I read who wrote it and what he was involved in, and then I read the circumstances under which he wrote the song, it all became very clear to me. We shouldn't even be singing this song as Black people. Really, we shouldn't be singing this song as Americans, right? And so I haven't sung it in 10 years, but I don't judge anybody who does. But they kind of say when you know better, you do better. So I'm going to ask this in your fields that you were in. If you were, it's a hard question to answer, but we're going to try and make you feel uncomfortable here. If you were still doing today what you did for a living for so long, how would you approach having new information about July 4th? Not new information, but let's just say being enlightened that July 4th, the way we traditionally celebrate it, was not meant for Black people. Sister Gator, I'll go with you as a former educator. How would you have approached it in the classroom?
If I were teaching right now, I'd probably be fired. Because right now in the climate that we have, and actually started Do you remember when they started talking about CRT, critical race theory, and they started banning certain books in the classrooms? I would have
CRT.
critical race theory. I would have been fired.
Wow.
Okay. And it just makes me think of an activity that I did with my students when I was teaching in Hoover, Alabama, during the Black History Month. I had my students to select an African American, and they had to write information about that person. They had to dress as that person, and I invited all their parents to the school, and they presented what they had learned about that particular character in their attire. I did the same thing here at Ruby Major Elementary, but I was teaching, no, in Hoover I had third grade. Here I did it with third grade as well at Ruby Major. The next school year, well, the summer prior to, the principal called me and he informed me that I was being transferred to the second grade. So I wondered, I said, I guess my presenting the Black history characters with this certain demographic of parents, because it's predominantly European ancestry.
I've been to Hoover.
Huh?
I've been to Hoover, Alabama. I know what's there. So.
Okay. Well, I'm talking about here in Hermitage right now.
Oh, in Hermitage, yeah, same thing. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was moved from third grade based on the premise, I presumed, that it was what was done was not a part of the expectations for the curriculum. So I could see that information that I have gained over the years is clearly different from what teachers are supposed to teach now based on certain political ideologies. So even when you're talking about Christopher Columbus, that has changed from the way that I taught before I retired based on the curriculum. I said, man, I messed those kids' brains up. I did not teach them the truth because I was trying to go by the state curriculum. I hope I answered your question.
That's rich. Pastor, how would knowing what you know now, how would you have guided your congregation through the acknowledgement of July 4th?
That's an interesting question because I don't see my congregation asking me anything about July 4th or any guidance. I guess in like in my wife's case, she had a mixed group of people that she was dealing with. In my case, I had African Americans, and I don't see that they would need any guidance. I think most of us kind of understand, in life and through what we've been through experience, that there's a difference between what we celebrate than others celebrate. And I think I would not have had that kind of encounter that would be bad.
That's fair. That's fair. Javon, as a producer and content creator, you're a vanguard. You're kind of a gatekeeper for information and how we in our community. And a lot of your material and your content, your art that you do is based in our community. How what are your thoughts around how to portray things like July 4th to our community?
I think, I would like to also ask you a question too, because is this question like on the most basic level? If you know the truth, will you tell it? Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's really where we're going.
Yeah, and if I'm not authentic and tell the truth, then like Ms. Gator said, I would not be teaching. And so filmmakers of faith deal with this all the time. I have friends who are faith-based filmmakers who won't put cuss words into their films to tell a story, but that's not the true story. They took a piece of it out, right? To appease a system to say, I am a faith-based filmmaker because I don't include, right? I don't include cussing, but that's not the true picture. So I hope I'm not confusing you.
No,
Do you
that's
follow?
absolutely, yeah,
So
absolutely. That was a true. There's a burden to tell the truth,
yes,
right? And
and
the
it,
truth, the truth hurts sometimes. We've come through a season. If you remember all of this stuff about Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben's, the branding of this stuff, and people were like, "Oh, you're trying to erase history." You're like, "No, we're trying to let you know that slave culture is not cool anymore," right?
yeah,
The whole idea that Donald Trump wants to reverse all of the names of Confederate generals who were human traffickers, for lack of a better term, and rename these forts back to these. But when you know better, you do better. And I think that's really kind of the theme of this. It's not that anybody's doing bad. Look, if you would celebrate July 4th, please do. I will be barbecuing on July the 4th. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
yeah,
But I think two things can exist at the same time. We can tell the truth in context about what it was, right? And we can adopt a unified way to make sure that we're saying this is what this applied to you and it didn't apply to us, but together it would, like Juneteenth, we have so as we understand that if it doesn't mean the same thing to you as it means to me, we can still get along without having the vitriol that we have. And I think that's kind of where we need to go. So with that, look, hey, I thank you all for your time and your input into this. And hopefully this will help some folks understand that America is not really a melting pot, to use a term that Jesse Jackson once said. It's more like a stew. You want to see the carrots and the onions and the peppers, and all together it tastes really good. But you don't have to lose your individuality in order for it all to work together. So until next time, you all, this has been Mom and Dad Talks. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.